Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton here with Brandon. Literally here with Brandon. We are recording this at an undisclosed location in the vicinity of Chicago.
Yeah, he's recording at my office on the way back.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, BCS season officially underway. 3 regionals have happened. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about our rounds in Chicago. We're going to start in Toronto. 141 players. Slime, 8 pants with the win.
So that slime being the Shizu level 1 combo into the new Miran package at 2.
Yep.
That's going into that kind of Benimaru off finisher top end to kind of close out games.
Yeah.
We see that both win here in Toronto and then later in Chicago. Spoilers. But here we see Slime come on the top 8 twice with that same kind of build.
In second place, Avatar, Bar Standby. So when we've talked about this meta, you and I, we've basically focused on 5 decks that are like the 5 decks that are like a tier above everybody else. These 5 decks are the only ones that really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Slime, Alice, Gura, Overlord, Quints, usually the 8 salvage Quints. Avatar has kind of become almost like a 6th deck, kind of on the outside still, both in terms of representation and maybe results. Like it's still early in its life cycle. This list is interesting because it's the only list I've ever seen that actually like kind of takes advantage of the Sokka. It still needs some things to go right. This deck, I think, has the highest ceiling out of anything we've seen with Avatar in terms of consistency, right? Because like you could do something with the choice top end. Choice top end is, what it is. You can find a way to make that magic happen. But the Bar Standby list seems to be the one that is getting the most consistent results when it gets played, because it uses that Azula level 3 to actually proc the Sokka with some consistency. So it usually gets its 7th attack, 8th attack. It gets its fancy top end more often than the choice list. Because the choice list, like, I think does have the higher ceiling. We've talked about this. Like, I still think someone's going to maybe solve that choice list, and it's going to be a menace for that one person who puts hundreds of hours into it. But like, this list is interesting. I don't know. Like, I don't know how good this list actually is. Like, it feels like it has a really high ceiling, but I also know that Avatar doesn't fix. Like, it doesn't fix. It doesn't mill that well. It's missing just these key profiles that you see in a modern deck. It's very weird. It's not Tokyo Revengers weird, but it's definitely weird. It's really like, if the Saga didn't exist, this deck wouldn't exist.
I think it's a really interesting list. I think it's taking advantage of some really interesting mechanics with that, mainly being the Sokka tied in with that Azula. It's also trying to take advantage of some of that more odd plussing that you have at 0 with Avatar, and some of just the different ways just to try to keep resources going in that game. Kind of looking at Steve's round by rounds in that list, it is definitely a deck that has at least some credit underneath its belt too. Like it didn't just sneak its way in. It went through some of these crazy things, and we want to make sure we clarify that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the deck did not like play nobody. It played 5 Hololives. It didn't have a single easy round.
Realistically, also against 2 SAO decks where presumably all of a sudden you have these level 2 big bodies on board at 1, and this deck doesn't have a lot of good answers to that.
Yeah, the only thing it lost to Quints Ichika, and it lost to 8 Pants Slime.
The winner, yeah.
So, like, in the final. So, like, we'll put a link to his video in the description. Like, you should definitely check it out. It's very interesting. Like, this is a very different kind of a deck. You don't see this kind of archetype very often. Like, I mean, this is the closest thing to the IMA that everyone was really afraid of, as we should have been, because that IMA was ridiculous. But this is the closest thing to that kind of, I'm going to try to just generate extra attacks by sacking something, Like, there are other things that have tried to summon extra attackers to the board, but they have massive whiff chances, right? This doesn't. Like, this is just going to work as long as you have a target.
When we looked at the decks overall going into the season, we talked about if somebody's able to solve Avatar could do really well. And I think that this is at least in that general direction of solving it for its current time frame. That being said,
but again, I want to give Steve his flowers. Like, he absolutely, like, finding a way to make Avatar work is one of the big challenges, I think, of the 2023 fall season. Whoever can solve it is going to have a massive advantage, because the deck, if you can put all those really interesting pieces together, is going to be really impressive. So, like, because there are some synergies in there that I'm sure are still undiscovered, because it's just that complex and wonky of a set. So Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the Atlas develops over time. But in any case, it finishes second here in Toronto. Moving on, third place, Oski Gura, no surprises. Fourth place, 8 choice Quints. We haven't talked about this list a whole lot. It plays 3 different choice combos usually, but it plays a level 1 into an early play level 3 combo into the level 3 combo. I played against this in Chicago. It's interesting. Like, the top end is consistent. It will consistently close from like 3-0. It doesn't have the massive reach that a lot of other top ends do. It's a very traditional feeling kind of deck when you sit across from it, except it also has a level 2 combo.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is the one thing about it that makes it different from these other like 1k ones. It also pushes more damage because it's slamming choice almost every turn because it has 3 combos it's trying to hit. So it's slamming choices, 1k ones, pushing damage all game long. Like, it's an interesting list.
I think part of the reason why we see this run a little bit more is because I think that level 1 combo does a little bit more too, right? The level 1 combo being able to also potentially clear board or essentially return it back to your opponent's hand allows for that kind of a little more board heavy meta, which realistically we're still kind of in. Like we're kind of transitioning away from that a little bit, but like we still have the big board decks like Alice and Slime. That being a big thing here with this deck, that having that be its little niche is why I think that this deck is seen a little bit more often than the 8 Salvage.
And let's put a pin in that.
Yeah.
Because we're going to want to come back to the board versus damage question. Because the meta, I think the last 2 weeks, the meta has officially turned the corner from being a board-based meta to a damage-based meta. Like, absolutely, it has officially turned that corner. We'll get to that when we talk about our rounds in Chicago. Moving on, another Oski Gura, 8-Pant Slime, and a pair of Alice Silicas, 5th through 8th. No surprises here. These are decks we expected to be good. The Silica top end still seems to be the one of choice for a lot of Sword Art players, but as we've talked about, there are 3 other top ends that are also good, and we're going to see some of those as we move on through these events. Moving on to an event from Sunday in Austria, 63 players. Things get weird in small events, and boy howdy, did Austria get weird. Starting with this Oski Choco 8 standby Hololive list. This is a very strange deck. So, it's 8 standby, which, okay. It runs the Oski combo. It also runs the Choco, which basically just like if you slam the standby that goes with it, you can sack it to stand this. And when your other character is frontal attacked, you can sack this 2-2 to pump it up 3-5. Basically, the idea is you're trying to get Luna on board via standby. It immediately becomes a level 0 when on stage, so it can't be early play bombed or anything like that. Anything that especially removes, high level cards doesn't touch it. When it gets reversed, you can ditch one, burn one. When it's frontal attacked, you have check and wreck. You can top check, and you can either put it on top or bottom. So you have scry when you get attacked. This is a very specific strategy. Your goal is to get these Lunas down, pump them up, use the Choco that you get on board to pump them up 3-5, use the IMA to not only decimate your opponent's board, but to also pump at 15 if it's in the front row. This is all about making Luna big, forcing him to crash into it, because you can't side the Luna, even though it's a 0. You are not. It says on the card you can't side into it. You have to crash into the Luna, which means every time you do, they're ditching one, pinging one, and because they don't lose characters on the board, they have the hand. They can just clock into the hand that they then ditch once they have the board, because they think you can't touch that board. It is extremely interesting. There is basically no other damage push in this. It is just trying to burn one twice, 3 times a turn, as many times as it can, and then try to get the Choco back down. So it's trying to slam the CX to bring the Choco back out, and then you just so that's what this is doing. It is trying to slow the game down to a grinding halt and not let you ever win board.
It plays the defensive counters to make that happen. It does have a little bit of push at the end with the Musashi, with the Kali, but for the most part, yeah, it's trying to win board at 2 and keep that board until the end.
And it does have the stock for stock swap and for, like you said, tap counter. So it's got, it's got the tech. It's got 4 1/1 targets. Like, it's literally the most 8 standby thing you've ever seen in your life. I'm honestly impressed by it. It's a very strange deck. I've never seen anything quite like it. It also plays 4 copies of this Watame that on play allows you to surveil one, my mistake. You can either leave it on top or you can mill it. So it's 1 card mill, or you can check it, and if it's a card that you want, you leave it there, because also when you play it, everybody mills 1. And if the level of the card put into your waiting room by this effect is higher than your opponent's, you just get to blind stock 1.
Mm-hmm.
So
when you're playing the 8 standby deck in the room, you're more likely to have the level 3s on top.
Exactly. This deck plays 12 3s. So yeah, you're probably going to hit that. You're probably going to hit that trigger a few times. So very interesting deck. Like, I like it. I'm a fan of how weird this is. And if you're sitting across from it for the first time and you don't have an answer for that much power on board, or critically in this meta, you don't have the damage push, which, keep that pin in there. We're coming back to that pin. I haven't forgotten. And somebody's going to Worlds because they built this. I'm very impressed. Well done. Moving on, we see 8 salvage Bang Dream. Again, gonna do better in a smaller meta. Escanor finishes 3rd. Silica 4th. Danmachi, the Hendrickson that we saw work very well in Rumble with Wybie, makes it into top 8. Kirito in top 8, and then the Eat Ski choice list from Quince, but without the level 1, it looks like. It looks like it's just the 2-1 and the 3-2.
It runs the 2-1 combo that allows it to essentially get additional power early. So, like, because the 2-1 combo comes down at 1, it, with experience, sits at 9k defensively, which is a little bit bigger than the 4-5 to counter up big level 1 combo. This also allows you to get the event that allows you to essentially save your characters on field. And kind of essentially start winning board that way, either through the event or through actually the power pump to step over things.
Yeah.
So with those things in place, you can then continue to loop that combo. That combo goes through, technically it goes through more cards, because you go through 4 cards instead of 3. Encore step combo, so you only need 1 of these in play instead of the full field like you would with with the level 1 combo.
The thing that really allows you to do this is the level 1 off combo, Itsuki, that gets big and also just generates you stock.
Yeah.
Like, it's essentially a Mel, right? A Hololive Mel. And it's one of the best off level 1s, I think, in the game right now. It's extremely powerful. So being able to have that means that you can actually just play the 2-1, because it's not like you have bad choices for the other lanes. You just slam a couple of these down. They're also big. They're also plussing you. Like, you might as well.
Yeah.
No, I like this.
And I think you can play into some of your more early plays a little bit more efficiently that way, because you're not worrying about the combo when you're just kind of playing into that. So yeah, no, I think it's a pretty solid build. Again, the 8 salvage top end that we've been expecting to see does make its way through.
So yeah, but again, want to emphasize that, like, this is not a typical event. Like, a lot of the mainland Europe events are very different. These are not. I don't know if there's a single deck here other than like the Alice deck that finished 4th that we're gonna see at a Worlds table. Like, none of these decks other than the Alice decks.
Yeah, I think the Alice decks are probably the ones you're going to see the most. I think you probably may see some SDS there too. But I think that the Hololive 2 you probably actually see too, because I think that's a pretty well refined list at this point. Like the amount of time spent with that, putting that together. I think we're going to see that, especially because that probably will not be banned between now and then.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. You get to dodge the ban list if you're on 8 standby Hololive, almost certainly. And again, like, if you do take this list to Worlds, you're the only Ozuki Choco in the room, and have people teched for that. Like, obviously they're going to see this list because it's public. You won an event with it. They're going to look at it. They're going to figure out how it works, and then they're going to decide going into Worlds, do I tech for this? Do I tech to deal with this matchup, or do I trust that I'm going to dodge it? It'll be interesting to see how people respond to this at the Worlds table, because now that is a threat to go to Worlds and be taken there.
Well, I mean, realistically, put that into Ichika. The Ichika level 1 combo, the bounce back to hand. We see some of these picks coming through in some of these other regionals as well, that, hey, that these things are coming in and saying, hey, no, we're moving board this way by bouncing back to hand. Yeah. All of a sudden, the Luna's now level 3 in hand. Yeah. So we got to figure out how to get back to waiting room to put it back on board to get that way going. So there are definitely ways to be able to play into some of these things, and some of these things we are seeing as the regionals continue on.
Yeah. Moving on to Chicago. This is where we were yesterday. 192 players. Biggest regional yet. Clinton winning Chicago, as is his prerogative. Every year it seems. On Slime, again, as is his prerogative. This time he's playing the new 8-pants Slime that we talked about. 8-choice Quince in second. I think we need to consider that 8-choice Quince is, like, it's good. Like, not that we didn't think it was good, but we didn't, I don't think, put it in the same category as these other decks. I think Quince as a nebulous category kind of it's bigger than the 8 salvage that we've been talking about.
It was also undefeated in Swiss as well, as was it undefeated in Swiss during Toronto. So, like, we have now straight records of this going undefeated in Swiss in this meta. So, from, like, almost back-to-back tournaments. So...
Yeah, no, deck is clearly good. We need to be paying more attention to 8-choice Quince for sure. Escanor finished third. Normal Escanor. Escanor top end is still good. And I think critically, slamming Climax every turn is good. And again, that pin.
Well, and Vince is a good player too, so he's able to actually get this going and make this happen. So,
Kirito finishes fourth. Hi, Dylan. Good job. Well done. He's the one who beat me in round 8. We'll get to that. He did very well with his deck. And then in 5th through 8th, we had another Oskigura, a pair of Slimes, and 8-choice Quince. So yeah, like 8 salvage, as much as, that has kind of been the talk around Quince, with a bit of, what is the 8 standby list still good, etc. 8-choice is really, like, making a push. Like, I wasn't super sold on it just because because the top end does not have the reach, but you don't necessarily need the reach when, again, you're slamming CXs every single turn. So with that in mind, moving on to rounds... Brandon, do you want to start?
Sure. Starting off with me, I was bringing Alice, the Argo top end, so 8-choice. This is the same list, effectively, that I brought to Rumble. Critically, I did make some changes going into this season, specifically bringing in the 3-2 Lifa that comes in with having at least 2 of the level 0 Lifa in waiting room. This allows you to, when you do an act ability, pump up the field by 2k power. So full field gets 2k power. This is a really good defensive tool, an offensive tool against decks that are also starting to meet the power threshold. So decks like Alice, decks like Slime, where all of a sudden you have these decks that are coming in offensively at could potentially just be a little bit bigger than where your line is. One counter is able to bump that full lane up by 2k power. So it's a really good defensive tool to help stop a lot of those things as well. Or step over things to try to step out of counter range for some decks. So that was kind of like my big tech piece for this season.
Did you end up using the 3-2 Lifa?
Yes, actually. That actually was what won me the game effectively, outside of just canceling like insane, against Carmen during round 5. So kind of breaking down rounds by rounds. Round 1, played against Don Machi. I had a slow start, but I was able to pick up steam during that mid game and use that to close out the game.
Damachi top end doesn't close. It's that simple. So that's why it's on the outside looking in. Damachi top end does not close.
Round 2, I was playing against 4-pants, 4-2 soul. He was able to stick a lot of damage early in that game and was able to effectively push me up higher than I was expecting to. I tried to respond back with Alice's, pushing him back up, but he was able to kind of clear that again.
Well, I think the 2 soul is an interesting choice there because it has that damage push. Like, slamming it, triggering it. Like, if you trigger a 2 soul, like, all of a sudden a swing for 2 becomes a swing for 4, swing for 3 becomes a swing for 5. And people aren't compressed like that in this meta right now. Like, compression isn't as important as it used to be. You can absolutely stick a random 5 in the middle of a game.
Well, but I mean, realistically, it was... he started, I swung back with 2 characters. He swung back at me with the tri-field of zeros and the 2 soul. In that open lane, he triggered 2 soul. So his first swing on the 2 soul turn, which is the first time he revealed the 2 soul, it also triggers the 2 soul. So he has a swing for 6 coming in that direct lane.
And in deck 1, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because that has, like, what, a 50-50 shot of hitting in deck 1, typically? And imagine being out 2 or 3 climaxes, and that happens.
Yeah.
If you're 5 out of, 35, you can absolutely just get yeeted to the middle of level 1, level 2 on turn 1.
Yeah, I think I canceled on 5. I was freaking out there for a second. No, I was able to get Alice on board. However, I pushed him into 2 with that Alice turn initially. I had an opportunity where I could have just waited an attack, which would have forced him to either try to force that up to make it and spend the resources to get there, and then he wouldn't have had the resources to get the Mirren combo in play. I did not do in that matchup. I corrected that mistake later. With that matchup, he was able to bring on his Mirrens. I was not prepared for that. I was not at 2 yet. I did not have Lifa in play, so he was able to clear my board relatively effectively, and that kind of spiraled out of control from there. So I was not able to get the resources enough to close him out, and he was able to close me out pretty effectively. Round 3 was essentially a mirror match with the Silica top end. I was able to present board first and able to defend board, so I was able to effectively be the Alice board on play against Alice, and that was enough to kind of hold through, deny Silica, and then just use the Argo for the win. I only needed 1 lane of Argo to close out that game. Then I played into Gura, compressed down really well. I was low level 2. By the time they got to level 3, they were not able to close me out with Gura, and then I closed them out with Argo. Pretty much as simple as that. Like it was a slow game. It was a really long game for being very fast decks, but I was able to compress my deck pretty efficiently in that mid game to survive the Gura onslaught, and then from there close out the game. Round 5, I played against Carmen. He was on Slime, the same Slime list he brought to Toronto and made top 8 with. I talked a little bit about that already, that I was able to get the back row Lifa in play before he was able to get his pieces down. In that matchup, I did not push him to 2, and by the time that he was able to get to 2, I was already in 2. I was at 2-0, able to bring the Lifa into the back row. So I had full Alice on board in front with then the 2k pump of Lifa in the back row, which was going to be too much for his Mirrens to be able to come into play. So he started switching toward that late game strategy, which was pretty effective. However, I was able to then bring in the Argos at the end. I did not have the climax for Argo at that point in time. We did end up going through time, or an overtime through this, but I was able to shuffle back on a small deck state to get some nice Musashis to be able to stick the appropriate damage needed. I was able to get him to 3-4 initially prior to his heal down turn, so he was at 3-4 going into my final turn, and I was able to use the Musashis effectively to close out the game. Going into round 6, I played against 8 Standby Quince. It was very back and forth in regards to damage push, but I held the board advantage the entire game, and so that really kind of carried through and was realistically what won me the game, was having that kind of board advantage. Going into round 7 against Slime once again, that kind of pants build. I was able to get Alice's on board. I actually did a little bit of the opposite of what I did before, and actually did a little bit more of a damage push here. I was able to slow down the 0 game, spend a little more resources for him on his side at 0. So he only had 3 stock going in, and then I bypassed his level 1 turn, essentially, pushing him basically straight to 2 with only 3 resources in play. His Shuna Ricky revealed 2 climaxes kind of thing, so like he had a really rough start as well. So I tried to just kind of press that advantage a little bit there, and so he was not able to get the Mirren board until much later. And by the time he had the Mirren board ready to go, it was already kind of more the end game at that point. So I was kind of able to then turn around and close out the game from there. He wasn't able to close me out with just the lack of resources he was able to build up throughout that game. He wasn't able to get the compression he wanted, and that just kind of ultimately was the issue at hand.
Because Slime is kind of the only thing left that's really compression focused at all. And even then, it's not as much as it used to be.
Yeah. Like he refreshed 5 climaxes going into second deck. Mm-hmm. Like that with Slime, mm-hmm. That's actually a pretty significant blow. Yeah. Going into that last round against Escanor, Vince is a great player. Yeah, he was able to, with that early climax slam, to be able to get those early climaxes at 0 climax combo. He was able to push me into about 1-4. With that 1-4, he also managed to put 2 of my Alices into my clock at level 1, mm-hmm. where I was in regards to like deck and like trying to like maintain board and win board. I actually needed to clock myself into 2 before deck refresh to get Alice's on board and essentially hard play them from hand. So I effectively got the Alice combo off, but I was at level 2 as opposed to like mid to up to mid level 1, which makes a significant difference. And from there, I kind of continued to eat damage throughout that game. I did not have the resources to effectively close the game efficiently, as well as like realistically, it was time for my opponents to start canceling, and he was canceling pretty well. So like he was at like 2-1, 2-2 by the time I was at like early 3, and there wasn't going to be a turn after that. So I'm like, can I close my opponent from from that level? And the answer is no. But I also couldn't survive a vanilla swing of climax slam of zeros. So I was like, okay, what do we got? I push him up into like early 3, but that's it's Escanor. Escanor's going to close the game regardless. So the game was over at that point, but I was just curious how much damage I could actually push into a slightly compressed deck.
And I think that's one of the advantages of playing something like an Argo or a Gura is that you have a Hail Mary that can work. You know, like you need to stick 13 damage. Okay, like here you go. Like we're gonna try because you have that ceiling. You know, and I think having that ceiling is really, really important in this current environment.
So to cap it off, I ended up going 6-2 on the day, falling just short of making it into top 8.
Speaking of decks with high ceilings, let's talk about Gura. I was on the Gura, but I was not playing the Oski. I was playing the Kali, level 1, on choice. It fixes and mills so much better than the standby list. If you trigger 2 climaxes in the standby list, you don't have enough mill, and if you're playing into something that can push any kind of damage, you just get yeeted to 2, you're already a level behind, you just kind of wash out and lose the game. That happened in my testing with Oski so many times that I went back to the Kali. I don't want to be in a position where I cannot save a game because I triggered too many climaxes. Sure, you're plussing on board, but if you trigger 2 climaxes early, the level 1s you're getting on the board are like brainstormers. You know, like you don't have good level 1 targets. Your level 2 targets are still only 7. You can't put them in the front row to win board, right? So because they're going to lose board. The only standby target you have that can potentially win board cross turn is literally Gura. So triggering too many of them at the wrong time just means you lose the game. And I didn't want to live and die by the standby trigger. I wanted to live and die based on whether or not I could play the game. So I chose to play the Kali. Round 1 I got a bye because of a shop challenge I won. And in round 2 I played into Alice Kirito, and my choice of playing the Kali was immediately vindicated. He swung at me once, he stuck 3 damage, I drew an extra climax, played 2 characters, slammed a climax, and he was at 1-4. I stuck 7 damage, and that was the game. That was literally it. He had like 2 stock because he had triggered a choice. I slammed the CX because he had clocked a climax, he triggered one, I assumed he had one in hand, I was probably going to stick all 7, I did, and then that was it. Like, that was the game. He couldn't get Alice down until way too late, because every turn I slammed a climax, I comboed, 3-3-3, every lane, because I'm running 31 soul triggers, 3-3-3, all game long. He did 8 damage because he didn't have enough mill, and he was already behind a level in damage. He's scrambling on the other side of the table trying to do something, and I'm just slamming climaxes every turn. And that was the game. Like, I didn't even need a Gura. It was just, I Gura'd at the end, I think, maybe. I pushed him to 3-6, and then he pushed me to, like, 3-0, but the outcome of the game was never in doubt. He was at 3, and I was at, like, 1-4. But, again, it was because I could just slam the CX over and over again. Round 3, I played into 8 choice. Much more normal game. He wasn't out a million climaxes early, so the damage push wasn't as effective, but it was still very effective. It's not difficult to get your Ame reverses against most things. So, pretty just normal game. One of those ones where we were both at 3, I canceled his last attack, and then I closed with Gura. Because I'm almost always going to push my opponent into 3 first because I'm pushing more damage than they are. So for me, it's very important to be at 2-2, 2-3 if I'm facing something with a high damage top end. 2-4-2-5 if it doesn't have as high of a ceiling. And that's why I think that ultimately 8 choice is a plus matchup for Choice Pants Gura, is because I can push them into 3, I can hold off be it 2-3-2-4, and 8 choice Quints, as much as I do like the deck, it does not have the high damage top end. I also had one target in waiting room for his shuffle back, and he stuck like 6 off the top, so he didn't even really have a shuffle back. So that also helped for sure. But yeah, like I was at 2-4 and he needed to stick a lot of damage, and the top end just doesn't have the reach. I played into Alice Argo in round 4. I actually played Roshan from the guy who won the Houston Regional a year ago. Really nice guy, super fun to play against. Would love to play against him again. Great game, back and forth. He was on Argo, and basically it was one of those things where I tried to not let him go to 3 immediately, but ultimately, like, it came down to I needed to cancel just enough of the Argo, and I didn't. I had a chance to close, and he canceled enough. Like, it was one of those games where it's like we both played well, and we both had good decks with high caliber top ends, and it was just like it came down to which damage stuck and which didn't. It came down to deck order, which honestly, if you're playing into a good player, you love it when it comes down to that, because it means that you played well. So I was not upset to lose that game. He's a great player, had a great deck. I love the Argo top end. I think it's my preferred way to play Alice. I don't know if it's the best, but it's definitely the way that I like to play Alice. I know that you like it too, and I think for the same reasons I do. It's just like that damage push is just so good. So yeah, losing to that deck does not feel bad at all. Round 5, I played into Gura, and honestly, this is a great matchup for Choice Pants because you push damage in ways that Oski doesn't. Like, the Oski list literally slams a standby and is pushing 1-1, or 1-2-2. You slam a choice and you push 2-3-3. That is the difference. Just being able to slam a 1k1 every single turn. If I can slam 4 climaxes that plus me damage in a game, and you slam 2, that's 6 damage that I get to throw at you that you don't get to throw at me. I can push Gura into 3, usually a turn quicker than it wants to, so like it may only have 2 Guras, which is I believe what happened in this game. He only had 2 Guras. He did do one thing though that was really good and almost cost me this game. He held up his tap counter in hand the whole game. He had 1 copy. He clutched it from the opening hand, and I never saw it in his refresh. Assumed he didn't have it, so I pushed him into 3. I was at like 2-2. He pushed me to like 3-5 because he double Gura'd. I came back at him with a single Gura and 2 just zeros, and I slammed the CX. I needed to stick like 2 damage, right? And he had a refresh point coming. I crashed with one of my zeros, and he rest counters my Gura, which I was literally going to side. I had fixed with a CX swap to make sure that top card was a trigger, so I knew I was going to get a burn 2 and a burn 1. I was going to try to side for 1, and then I had another attack. Like, I was good. I was ready. And then he rest counters my Gura, and I went, oh no, I might have blown this. But he did a great job. He hid that well. Like, he played it exactly the way he needed to. If you're playing that tap counter, like, if you can keep it hidden, then do so. Because I absolutely played right into his hands. Like, I almost blew it because of that. I ended up winning on the other attack because I had one more attack and I got it. But he played that really well. But I do think that that's a poor matchup for Oski, like, because of the damage push difference. I think I was a little shaken by that one because the next round I played horribly into 8 salvage Quints. I messed up my level 1 combo. I messed up really badly. I was a level behind in damage. I should have lost that game, and then I just sack canceled his whole Quints combo. I was 2 out of 6. I canceled the burn, Mocha the top 2, they were both clean, and then I canceled the swing, and then I canceled enough off of after the refresh. Like, probably shouldn't have won that game. That was every once in a while, you lose a game that you should win, and every once in a while, you win a game you should lose. That was definitely what happened in that round. So, that happens, you take your luck where you can find it. But at that point, that was the only game where I was like, I haven't played well. Every other game up to that point, I had played well, but I locked back in, went into play against Alice Silica in round 7. I don't want Alice to go to 1 if I can help it. I want to get the reverses with the Callies. Like, the Callies don't need reverses, but it's nice to win that board because then they're swinging back 2-2-2 instead of 3-3-3 with open lanes. So I got sent into 1 first, which is fine. I triple callied, double callied rather, he triple canceled. And he didn't have a 0. So he passed turn because he was still at 0-4. So I got a whole extra turn of Cali. I got to drop a third Cali, combo again. I had stock for days, I had hand for days, and that was enough. Ultimately, that was the difference. He did push me with the Silica pretty far, because the Silica is good. I had pushed enough extra damage, basically having a whole extra turn, a whole extra combo turn, no less. I just pushed enough damage, I had enough resources where I was just too far ahead. He got very unlucky in that one, but I was able to take advantage, and I was ahead by a level most of that game. Round 8 was a good matchup. I played against Dylan, a guy I played against in Chicago. Good player. He ended up finishing 4th. If I win this game, I go to top 8. It came down to the final play, and because it was a good game. His deck is good, my deck is good. I needed one cancel, and I didn't get it. If I'd gotten one more cancel, I would have closed with Gura the next turn. That happens. That's Weiss. But not an unfair loss at all. Just a good game between two good decks. So, but I feel good about how I played. I played well in 6 of the 7 games that I played. I really only played poorly in 1. And I've had a really good season, honestly. So, like, being able to have a successful run at an in-person regional, you know, ended up finishing 12th of 192, which is, I'm happy with that finish. Like, once you get into the X2 territory, it's like, you know, did you get the one cancel that you need? Did you stick the extra damage you needed? Like, it comes down to that. That's the minutia between making top 8 and not when you get into that kind of situation. So, like, at that point, especially in the contemporary meta, where so many things are down to deck order, it's like, you play as well as you can, then you hit a ceiling, and you need a little bit of luck to carry you over, you know? And I got a little bit of luck, and I also got a little bit unlucky. Like, that happens. It's Weiss. You can't really... I don't think you can really, like, make yourself do better than X2. You know, you can run the deck as many times as you like. You can fine-tune the deck as many times as you like. You can play as well as you can. You're still going to lose a couple of games, you know, in a random batch of games. That being said, let's pull that pen out now. I have been on the damage wins games train for a long time. Like, I played Ilulu, right?
Yeah.
I played a deck where I'm literally just slamming bars over and over again every turn that I can, and I'm finishing with a 1-4-4, 1-4-4, 1-4-4, right? Because damage wins games.
Yeah.
That was the whole game plan with that deck, is that you throw as much damage as you can at the opponent and then have answers for their best cards. Now you don't even have to run answers for their best cards because your best cards are so good. The best decks in this game, with the exception of Slime, are super top heavy. They all have ridiculous push at the top. But they also need ridiculous push in the mid game. This is why I played the Kali over the Oski more than any other reason. The number of games I won yesterday that I would have lost if I was playing Oski, simply because the extra damage push from slamming an extra climax was way more important than the plussing I would have gotten on board. You don't need to triple Gura when your opponent is already at level 3 and you're a level ahead of them, so they can't close you in return. I'm not scared of triple Gura if I'm sitting at 2-2. I also have more control over my deck in this list because I actually control my refresh. Because I have deck speed because of my combo. I went back 7 out of 28 often. Whereas in standby, like the opponents I was playing against, they would go back 5 out of 30, 6 out of 32. And it's like, if you get, like, I pushed my opponent into level 2 before refresh several times just because I'm slamming CXs. And that's the game right now. I would argue that it's really hard to mill your deck fast enough unless you have a mill 4 combo to get out of your first deck before hitting level 2. And the difference between 6 out of 30 and 7 out of 28 is massive. That's a whole cancel in your next deck that you're going to get, your opponent's not going to get. I think that matters a lot. I think we've turned the corner. This meta is the most damage-dependent meta that I've ever seen. Board only sort of matters. I would argue that board only matters insofar as it allows you to push more damage. Winning board allows you to swing into open lanes and push more damage. I will always take 3-3-3 over 2-2-2 in this meta. Every single time. Because people also aren't compressed. Now, people are, especially like Alice. Alice almost always refreshes with a climax on the board. Right? So most people are not going back 8 ever. And when they go back with 6 or 7, I mean, the number of times I've watched someone go back with 5 yesterday. Like, if you trigger, you know, you're out of luck. And it's because of the mill stuff, you know, like, people aren't playing mill, so they're not that compressed. And if you're gonna leave patches of 3, 4, 5 open damage throughout your whole deck, I'm gonna try to exploit them. And that was one of the reasons I won yesterday, as many rounds as I did, is just pushing the damage. Honestly, like, I absolutely don't like, and that also that allows you to win games you shouldn't win. Like, I shouldn't have beat 8 salvage quints yesterday. I should have absolutely lost that game. But when you can slam a climax at the board and just shoot 7 damage at someone, all of a sudden you're back in the game. And now all you need is a miracle cancel, and you can win the game. You can find miracle cancels. Those will happen, especially when you're able to compress. And I was pretty compressed. Like that last deck where I got 3 cancels out of 4 swings after refresh, I went back like 7 out of 28. You can get miracle cancels when you have actual compression. Like, as much as I was lucky to win that game, I absolutely wasn't going to be lucky enough to win that game if I was on Oski, because my compression wouldn't have been nearly as good. And I also wouldn't have been able to push the damage to get him within range for my top end. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, like, I mean, not to completely rant over everything, but like, I really think that is the most important thing in this meta, and that also means this meta sucks. Because, like what you were saying, like, you were playing into two soul slime. Mm-hmm. By all means, do it. Because why not? In deck 1, you're absolutely going to push your opponent to 1. You don't get a second turn at 0 anymore. If you go first, Wild Weiss did this very, very good data analysis on going first. You should absolutely check it out. Going first does give you a measurable advantage. I think you can literally mitigate that by playing a 2-soul. Could you literally just play a whole bunch of 0s and 8 2-soul triggers and just sack your way to X2 at a regional in the near future? Just play the stock soul and level 2 combos that have like those level 0s that plus you. And just like leave those in your back row. Leave a stock soul in one, a stock soul combo in one, a 2-soul combo in the other, and just slam 2 souls every single turn you can and play 4 CX swaps and just push 9 damage every single turn. Is that enough now? Not now, but it might be in the future. We're not that far away from the entire meta just being throw damage at the board. We're almost there. I see the cogs in your brain whirling away. There are sets where you could literally do something like that.
I don't know, something like maybe Ari Foreta coming out with the 2-soul combo.
Ari Foreta has a good 2-soul combo. And not only is that, when your damage cancels with the 2-soul combo, which it will sometimes because it's a 2-soul, so you go +4.
Yeah.
You go +4 with 1 lane. So what you get to do is you get to swing 3-3-3, potentially stick 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 damage, depending on what sticks in those 2 lanes. Mm-hmm. And if the one other lane cancels, you went +4. That's a whole level 1 combo. Like, Why not? Absolutely, why not at this point? This is the primary reason I don't like this meta. The nuance is like gone. There is no playing around anything. None of that matters. Throw damage at the board.
Kind of with that idea of trying to push damage to the board, I think that one of the big things with that helps along that way, and I think you kind of alluded to it too, sometimes helping along that way is winning board and being able to have that kind of board opportunities to push that damage in open lanes. Yeah. To be able to pump soul in those other ways. Like, for example, in the deck that you're playing with right now, we have a bunch of soul triggers, right? Yeah. Those bunch of soul triggers help add to the combos they're already going through. Instead of sending for a 2-2-2 with your swing 3-3-3 because of triggers. Mm-hmm. Winning board kind of does that same thing. Right. And so I think what we're seeing, especially with what we've been seeing lately, we've been seeing boards that are either big or trying to be big boards so they can win boards so they can do that extra soul push with like SAO, with slime, trying to be those boards as well as have the tech pieces to be able to interact with your opponent's stuff. Because I think having those specific key pieces are also important. Yeah. Because if you have the tool to shut off your opponent's stuff, you use it, right? And I think there are a handful of decks that have just enough tools to be able to make some of those changes in FX. And that's why we've seen a lot of them. What we saw a lot of in Swiss, especially as top tables in Chicago, there was a lot of slime. there was a lot of SAO in those top tables.
Yep. And
there wasn't as much Stand by Gura near the top at the end. There wasn't as much Overlord at all.
I'm willing to make the argument that one of the reasons that Slime is really good right now is not only that it has good plussing combos. By accident, what people are doing is they're just throwing extra damage at the board the whole game. And when they win on board on defense with their massive 2-1s and people crash into them, that's more damage they're pushing. But what's really making them really good is the fact that you can go level 1, swing with a combo, 2-2-2. Level 2, swing with a combo, 2-2-2. Level 2, I don't need to slam to go 2-2-2. And that doesn't include any soul triggers. Like if that deck is loaded with soul triggers because it's running a bunch of level 2s. So if you're running 20 plus soul triggers and you're going 2-3-2, 1, 3-2-3, and then as soon as the 2 souls hit the board, all of those are swinging big. Like Benimaru gets to swing, and it's running, it's running a high count of high level cards because of the Benimaru, right? Because you want to hit a high level card for a high level burn. So now those are more soul triggers, right? So the Benimaru, if you triple Benimaru, suddenly you're looking at, if you have an empty lane and a trigger, you're looking at, reveal a 2, swing for 3, burn for 2. Reveal let's say you reveal a 1, right? So, okay, fine, you whiff that one, you still swing for 3 if you slam a CX, 2 normally. And then in the other lane, you reveal a 3, burn 3, swing for 4 if you have a CX, down 3 if you don't. Like, that's enough if your opponent's already at 3 because they've been eating 3s all game. This is the meta now. This is the game. This is what Weiss is now. I'm going to have so much more fun playing Lost Format. There's no nuance in this game right now. Almost none. I shouldn't say no, there is almost none. But yeah, we're gonna do something with that. But yeah, no, like the game feels really weird to play right now. I'm not having a super fun time, despite like even doing well, I'm not having a super fun time. So that's it. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Thursday with 5 cards, 5 minutes, and next Tuesday it's my turn to have a deck tech, and I'm talking about a deck that I really like, that is bad in the current meta, but I like it. We're talking about Review Starlight. It's going to be a good time. We'll have gameplay for that in the following Thursday, and then in 2 weeks we'll talk about more BCS. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.